Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. Thank you all for joining us today on the Portland Cocktail Week Facebook page or YouTube, wherever you're watching. Today, we are doing a very exciting class. We are at the distillery of Frey Ranch, and we're joined by the co-founders, Ashley and Colby, as you can see up there, and some of their awesome team. So today, we're just going to talk through kind of the story behind the brand. They're going to take us on a really cool distillery tour, a little guided tasting. So we have a jam-packed hour ahead of us. But before we get there, if you haven't already, go ahead and like us on Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram, PDXCW, as you can see below here. A lot of cool classes just like this can be found on all of those channels. And of course, we have more to come in person at Portland Cocktail Week, November 13th through the 17th. If you haven't yet, you can buy your bartender passes on Eventbrite. All of the links are in our Instagram bio. So check that out. I think that's all of the plugs. So Ashley and Colby, I will throw it over to you guys.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Colby Frey.
And I'm Ashley Frey.
We're the founders of Frey Ranch Distillery. We're here in Fallon, Nevada. Mm-hmm. And it all started, my family's been farming in northern Nevada here since 1854. Nevada didn't even become a state until 1864, 10 years later. And we've been continually farming in Nevada ever since. And the importance of that is we grow 100% of the grains for all of our whiskeys right here on the farm. And that 165 years of knowledge on how to grow the grains in our specific soil and our climate with our irrigation techniques, agriculture is so different depending on where you are in the world. And so that 165, 170 years of knowledge passed on from generation to generation really allows us to grow a lot better quality ingredients. And with anything, with better inputs, you end up with better outputs, which we'll go over later. But so we're in Fallon, Nevada. It's the oasis in Nevada, which we have this abundance of water. And Nevada is really a big desert. And we have this beautiful water that comes down from the Sierra Mountains. It's from both sides of Lake Tahoe. And there's the Truckee and the Carson Rivers. They flow to a reservoir where we collect and hold our irrigation water until we need to irrigate our crops. So what else?
Yeah, so let's touch on some malting.
Yeah.
Because we also malt all of our grains right on site.
Yeah, so all the wheat, rye, barley, and corn are all grown right here on the farm. And then we malt our barley because we want to have total control over the entire process. So we can malt. Well, traditionally, barley is the most malted grain, but you can malt any grain. And so we've malted wheat, rye, and corn as well. Malting is a process when you actually germinate the grain. And so we have this really cool steep tank where we auger the grain into the steep tank. We get it to absorb moisture. That grain absorbs the moisture, and then we put it inside this drum that has the ideal germinating conditions so that grain can grow. And then when it gets to a certain point, we stop any future growth by drying it. And that's considered malt at that point. And so the easiest way and the best way for me to explain why malt is so important in whiskey is if you think of Mother Nature, you put a seed in the ground, you add water, it puts a little taproot going down, and it starts to build up all this energy to grow up towards the sun. And at that point, we harness that energy in the form of enzymes throughout the malting process. And so our goal has always been to grow 100% of our own grains. And to do that, we have to malt our own barley too. And so Ashley and I took over the farm from my parents in 2009. And it was always our goal is to showcase the grains and the crops that we're growing right here on the farm. And so we actually really loved whiskey and thought, what better way to showcase the crops that we're growing than to make them into whiskey? We'd always grown wheat, rye, barley, and corn, but traditionally we just sold them on the open market. So we didn't really get to see or hold the final product. So we're so lucky to be where we're at. We have beautiful water, beautiful farm ground. We also grow a lot of alfalfa, which goes around the world. It's almost the opposite of the grain. It goes to China, Dubai, Japan, and Taiwan because it's such high quality. We're in this ideal growing area in what we call the high desert. We have really hot days and cool nights. It allows the plants to grow during the hot days and then the breed during the cool nights. And so we're really fortunate to be where we are.
Awesome. So at this point, Colby's going to start walking out to the distillery and get the camera going so we can give you guys a virtual tour of the still room, the fermentation room, and the barrel house. And while he's doing that, I think it's a great opportunity for us to get out our bourbon sample and start some of the tasting.
I wanted to mention this quickly just at the top of the show. If you all have any questions, please drop those in the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. Our team is watching both of those comment sections, and those will go directly to the Frey Ranch team. So any questions, make sure to drop those in the comments section. We've got you covered.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, most important things to remember about Frey Ranch is that we do 100% of the process right here on the farm. So as Colby mentioned, we grow 100% of the grains. And in fact, none of those ingredients have ever left our possession until we have customers take bottles home from the tasting room, or we send them to our distributor, or we send samples out like we did for you guys. But we're very passionate about having 100% control over the entire process. Definitely something that we strive for and we're very proud of. We're also a founder-led team. So me and Colby are the founders here. And our place is very important to us too, just east of the Sierra Nevada mountains, where all of our irrigation water does flow from both sides of Lake Tahoe. So if you guys have your bourbon ready, I'll go ahead and talk through some of the bourbon tasting notes and some of the attributes on it. It's a 4-grain bourbon, corn, wheat, barley, and rye. We actually have the mash bill on the back of every single bottle. So if you guys ever pick up one of our bottles, we're very transparent about what goes into our whiskey. So we've got 66.6% corn, 10% winter wheat, 11.4% winter rye, and then 12% two-row barley that's malted right on site. We went with a 4-grain bourbon because we've always grown those grains right on the farm, and we really wanted to showcase all of them in our bourbon. We had made some 3-grain bourbons, a high rye and a high wheat, but we really loved the balance of the 4-grain and being able to really showcase our farming techniques and the grains that we grow here. As Liz mentioned, please share your tasting notes in the comment section. I'll share mine today, but I love to hear everybody else's. Today I'm picking up some great butterscotch maple syrup on the nose, a little bit of banana chips, baking spices. Front of the palate, I get some nice creamy texture from the wheat, maybe a little creme brulee, more of that maple syrup. Back of the palate, I'm getting some of that rye spice and some baking spices on the finish. Like I said, you can really taste through those grains. So the corn up front, the wheat front of the palate, and then that nice rye, the back of the palate. Here at the Frey Ranch, the bourbon does represent 80% of our production. We're primarily a bourbon distillery, and we've got a little over 13,000 full-size whiskey barrels that are aging right now on property. It's our 90 proof, and it's aged for an average of 5 years. So basically what that means is when we start pulling down our barrels, we do them 100 barrel batches, and they're anywhere from about 4.7 up to 5.3 years old. Some are a little bit older, and we're really working towards that 5-year age statement.
Eric Lopez is tasting with us at home and said that he really enjoys the spice finish. And Chandler is also tasting with us at home, and she loves the creamy nose.
Yeah, I really pick up that the sweetness on the nose from the corn.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a great grab for the holidays.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pass it over to Colby. It looks like he's got his phone over there, and he's got the gimbal set up. So, Colby, if you're ready, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I'm standing in front of the distillery right now. If my gimbal drops again, I might have to go without it. You guys will just have to put up with a little. Yep, I have to put up with a little bit of bumps here. Sorry about that. All right. Sorry, guys. We're standing in front of the distillery. So we built this distillery in 2014. We finished it. We did all of our own electrical, plumbing, gas lines, steam lines, everything is all designed by us. So we're really proud of it, but we're standing right in the middle of the farm where the distillery is. You can see right over here, we have some tractors. There's a beautiful green field right behind it of rye. We're going over here to the barrel house right here. We have the silo. We have the old barn right over here where the office is. Some antique tractors. Our Our house was built in 1918 over there. That's on the National Historic Register, but we're literally right in the center of the farm here. And that's really who we are, and what's really important to us is the agriculture side and the distilling side. So we're going in the still room first. What's really unique about our distillery is we have two types of stills. We have a continuous still and a pot still. And I'll explain how they work in just a second.
I know you can't see the comments, Colby, but everyone is very impressed with how stunning the views are.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're so lucky to be where we're at here. Hopefully everybody's impressed with how steady I hold this, but I'm sure they're not going to be.
No complaints.
But,
no complaints yet.
So we're in the still room right now, and we have a pot still and two continuous stills. They're the columns right here. And for those of you that don't understand or how distillation works, distillation is essentially you're boiling out the alcohol, because the boiling point of alcohol is 172 degrees. So you heat anything with alcohol already in it above 172. The alcohol begins to boil. That boiling alcohol vapor in the pot, for example, goes up the head of the still over to the condenser, and you condense that boiling alcohol back into a liquid. That's basically distillation. Continuous stills work a little bit different, but it's the same basic principle. You're boiling out the alcohol. You put in mash, which is fermented grain, at the top of the column. We inject steam at the bottom. That steam heats up the mash. The mash begins to boil, and it comes out this side of the still continuously. So as long as we're pumping in mash at the top, steam at the bottom, we got alcohol nonstop. It's a continuous operation. Now, we feel like continuous stills are a lot more efficient, but pot stills, the way they work is you fill up the pot, you wait for it to heat up, and then you collect the heads, the hearts, and the tails. And the heads, the hearts, and the tails are all determined by boiling point. So the boiling point of the heads, for example, has like methanol and acetone in it, things you don't want. And they have a lower boiling point than alcohol. And so we throw away the heads. Then the hearts is the good stuff that we want to keep. And then it's kind of in the middle of the run. And then towards the end is the tails. It's oily and off flavored. And we get rid of those too. But those are all determined with boiling points. And so the problem with a pot still, though, is it's not very efficient. You have to fill it up. You have to wait for it to heat up. You have to collect the heads, the hearts, the tails. You have to let it cool down. You have to empty it out again, refill it. It's a slow process. And so what's really unique about this, or actually, let me back up. The benefit of the pot still, though, is you can take those heads, hearts, and tails cuts, which is why we think it's better for quality. But the continuous stills are better for quantity. And so by stripping everything in the continuous stills, what we do is we strip it from 8% mash to 40% alcohol. Then we pump that 40% alcohol over to the pot still, and we redistill everything in the pot still, where we can take a heads, a hearts, and a tails cuts. Now we're getting quality and quantity, because instead of putting 8% mash into the pot still, we're putting 40% stripped alcohol in there, and we're kind of getting the best of both worlds. These are all made by Vendome Copper and Brass. They're the same guys that made Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, Maker's Mark, Buffalo Trace, everybody's stills. And at the time, they had made hundreds, if not thousands, of continuous stills and thousands of pot stills. But they never made them where they work in unison together like this. And so it was really kind of a one of a kind. We're really proud of it. And it was really kind of fun for us to help them design it and put it together. When we got the still, they put it together in the factory. It was one of a kind. There's no instructions. There's no manual, nothing. They took two pictures. They disassembled it. They sent us the pictures, sent us the still, and we had to put it together looking at these two pictures, which is really a blessing in disguise, because we really understand the still inside and out. By really knowing how it works and how it functions, you can get the best products out of it. You can also fix it. And so we're so fortunate for that, except for the fact that when we called Vendome right after they got done, and we told them, hey, everything's running great. Thanks for everything. We're really happy with it. But it's a little bit hard to put it together with just those two pictures. And they said, wait a minute, we didn't send you the blueprints. And so we put together this whole thing without any blueprints or anything. It's kind of a fun story. Fun for us to do too. As farmers, we have fun building and creating and fixing things.
We had a quick question.
Sure.
Chandler, what is your still's name?
Oh, that's a good So we've never named it, and I've never just had the right name. And so we need to name it, but if you guys come up with something great, tell us. But we've never named it. Everybody else names their stills, and we have 3 of them, and none of them have a name.
Chandler, you heard the man. If you have a name, drop it in the comments.
Yeah. So this is our mash cooker. Grain has a lot of starch in it, and starch is essentially a long sugar molecule. And so by cooking the grains, we break that starch into fermentable sugars. It's a really important part of the process. Then we add yeast. The yeast converts the now fermentable sugars into alcohol during the fermentation process. And so that's what's happening right here. It's doing 3 things. It's creating alcohol. It's CO2, which is 100% of the movement in this tank is all happening from the yeast and the CO2 and the bubbles that are coming up naturally from the yeast. And then the third one is heat. So if you guys were here, you could stick your hand way down here and really feel the heat that's coming off the still. But what we're doing in this room is we're essentially creating the alcohol that we can take to the stills and distill out and create our product. So today we're making bourbon. So this is a wheat, rye, barley, and corn mash bill in this fermenter. We have 4 fermenters. Each one's about 5,000 gallons. You can see here, they're very deep and big. And we empty 1 tank a day and we fill 1 tank a day because it takes 4 days to ferment. After 4 days, we pump it over to this tank, and it's called the beer well. Now, the beer well is basically like a big agitation tank that keeps the liquids and the solids from separating so that we can feed them into the continuous stills. We don't want those liquids and solids separating and having an inconsistent flow in those stills. After the mash comes out of the continuous stills to the bottom of the continuous stills, there's no alcohol in them anymore. It gets pumped out here to a separator. We separate the liquids and the solids. This liquid right here is coming out of the continuous stills. It separates the liquids and the solids. The solids come over here. They go into this trailer, and they get fed to the cows next door. It's still really got a lot of feed value to it. It literally just goes on a John Deere tractor right there to next door, and then the liquid goes into our irrigation ditch, and it's very acidic. And this acidic liquid helps balance the pH in our soil because our soil is a little bit on the alkaline side. And so we put that on the fields, and we're actually able to benefit from it. We're able to benefit from these solids. And then the dairy cows, they make manure. Manure is the best fertilizer there is. We bring that back to the field and spread it on the field. And we're really fortunate for that because we don't have to buy a bunch of commercial fertilizer or anything like that. For those reasons and some other ones, including like we use all of our own cooling water for all the stills, is all from a reservoir right here on the ranch. We priced out a chiller, and to run a chiller to have enough cooling capacity to run all of our stills and fermenters and everything else, we'd actually have cost us several $100,000 worth of electricity a year, just to put it in perspective of how much we would use. And when we use the pond, we use very little. We're very fortunate, and it's just saving so much energy. We grow all of our grains surrounding the distillery, so we're not hauling them in from far away. A lot of distilleries haul in their grains from Canada, and even some distilleries in Kentucky haul in their rye from all the way from Germany. So we're going in the barrel house now. So this is our first barrel warehouse. It holds 1,456 full-size barrels. We have 2 more out back that hold 8,400 barrels each. We're really fortunate being here in Nevada because we do have 4 distinct seasons, and that's really important for the aging of the whiskey. It expands during the hot summers inside the barrels. It contracts during the cold winters, and when it comes off the stills, it's crystal clear. And so a lot of that color and some of the flavor comes from the barrels. So that's really important for that expansion and contraction to really accelerate the aging and really get it to push in and out of the wood. So this warehouse is unheated, unair conditioned, but we do humidify it because that's the only thing that we don't have here is a lot of humidity. We're very dry, which is actually a benefit in the field side because I had a friend that recently had to go and spray fungicides on corn in Kansas, Kentucky, and Illinois. And because they had such bad mold, mildew, fungus, all these problems that we don't have here because it's so dry. So we can add humidity to the barrel warehouse really easy, and we kind of get the best of both worlds where we can grow extremely high quality grains and also age them the right way. The barrels are all charred on the inside, and that's really important. But all of our barrels are charred, char 3 on the heads, and a char 4 on the staves, and that gives it a little bit different flavor profile because it's the Maillard reaction is what it's when you char a steak or you toast your toast, you're actually changing the physical properties of whatever you're charring, and that's so that char level brings out the natural sugars from the wood. So it's really important to bring that out for the flavor and also the quality and consistency. You guys want to take back over?
Yeah, thanks for the great tour. As Colby mentioned, where he's standing right now is our first barrel warehouse, about 1,400 barrels. We actually have 2 barrel warehouses that are right behind that. The Wi-Fi is horrible out there, or else we'd take you there. But 1 barrel warehouse is completely full with a little over 8,400 barrels. And then the second one we're starting to fill up, or the third one, I guess, back there, we're starting to fill up right now. So as Colby walks back, I thought it'd be a great opportunity to start in with the rye tasting.
Before we get into that, do you want to hear a couple more of their tasting notes from the bourbon?
Oh, great. Yeah.
Awesome. So the creamy nose, the spice finish is incredible, Sarah says. The banana chip nose is wonderful as well. They love the mouthfeel. They said it's very, very silky. That came through a couple times. Mike is getting creme brulee. And then, the spice finish, they are very into.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, great tasting notes, you guys. Thanks for sharing.
Lovingly, this is a good one. Lovingly viscous with autumn spices and welcome sweetness.
Awesome. Very nice. So if you guys have your rye ready, we can get into some of the tasting notes. I just poured mine. This is our rye packaging right here. As I mentioned, with the bourbon being 80% of our production, our rye is 15%. So much smaller in quantity and number of barrels we have aging. Mash bill is 100% rye, and we did that because we really wanted to showcase just the rye and see what it tasted like as a whiskey without an influence from another grain. So as we get into tasting notes, just keep that in mind. It is 100% rye. So on the nose, I actually, these are kind of fun tasting notes, but I get bazooka bubblegum. Put in the chat if anybody else gets that. And like sarsaparilla, maybe the little root beer barrels. Honey, I definitely get some really nice honey on the front of the palate. And then for it being 100% rye, it's not overly spicy. It's not that huge spice bomb that's going to like make your tongue or your mouth numb. It's just enough. Yeah.
My favorite part, or my favorite award that we got from the rye, is Whiskey Advocate named us in their top 10 in their fall buying guide, fall 2020 buying guide. It was quite a while ago now.
Yeah.
But it was an honor because their social media and everything said our top 10 whiskeys hail from Kentucky, Tennessee, Nevada, Scotland, and Ireland. And I thought, how cool is it to have Nevada next to all these amazing whiskey growing regions and countries that have had hundreds of years to get their stuff together.
Yeah. No, that one was a really fun one. Very, very humbling. Get a couple people that are picking up that bazooka bubble gum. The sarsaparilla, yeah. Colby gets dried mint kind of on the back of the palate finish.
Yep.
I don't pick that up, but a lot of people do pick up that dried mint.
Oops.
Linda picks it up for sure, yeah. So as I mentioned, bourbon, 80% of the production, the rye being 15%. That last 5% of production is in our innovative series, which we're going to touch on just in a little bit. Oh, a dried basil. That's great, yeah. So the rye is also aged for about 5 years. I forgot to mention this is a bottled and bond, so it's at 100 proof.
It's aged for 5 years. Our next batch is over 6
years. Yeah. We had a really great question come through about the grains and if we've seen any difference between the grains that we grow and grains from other farms.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's thousands of different varieties of each grain to start off with, and there's different irrigation techniques, there's different fertilizer management, there's different, seasonalities in different places in the world. And so everything's going to be a little bit different. Grain is a little bit more consistent than fruit in that way, but there's a lot of ways to get it, manipulate it, make it the way that we want it. And so by growing it for a purpose, so grain is a commodity. Traditionally, it's just sold on the open market, and there's very few quality incentives for grain. And if there is quality incentives, traditionally it's for the animal feed market, not for distillers, because that's the biggest consumer of grains. And so by growing it ourselves, we ensure that we get what we want and how we want it. And one of the biggest, easiest ways for me to explain like one scenario is, things like nitrogen fertilizer. The more we put on traditionally, the more yield we get. And grain is a commodity, so there's a set price. There's no real quality incentive. So traditionally, a farmer puts on more nitrogen, they get more grain, and they sell it for the same amount, and they're better off by doing that. But nitrogen in grain boosts protein, and protein and starch are inverse. So when one goes up, the other goes down. And what happens is in the distillery, we need starch. That's what we're turning into alcohol. Protein is a nuisance. And so by putting on a lot of nitrogen fertilizer, our yield will go up, but our quality will go down. So we don't do that. We try to, we take tissue tests, soil tests. There's so many things in agriculture that we can do to make better quality. And in the distillery, our goal from the beginning is to grow the best quality grains we possibly can so that we can get the best quality whiskeys in the end.
Let me see if any other great tasting notes. That's a really good question. How long did it take to decide the char level combos on the barrels?
That's a great question. So when we started off, we actually got our license to legally start distilling in 2006. And from 2006 till 2013, when we finally got state laws passed in the state of Nevada to allow the operation of craft distilleries, we played around with all kinds of different mash varieties, everything else, including char levels and barrels. And we filled up a char 3 and we filled up a char 4. And we really liked them both, kind of for different reasons. But then we realized we liked them better when you blended them together. And we liked the 4 a little bit better, but not much. And so that's why we did the staves, which are a little bit more surface area than the heads. And we really feel like that was the best, flavor profile in the end for us.
Yeah. Someone also asked if you char on site.
No. And that's a job right there, man. Those barrels, the only thing holding them together are hoops, and to think that they hold liquid, that's a job to be able to take them apart and char it and then put them back together and still hold liquid. That's an art form.
So those of you that just got the little small bottles and they haven't seen our product actually market, I thought I would go over some of the bottle attributes and design qualities that come from our bottle. If you haven't been able to pick up one of our bottles or see them in market, they really are truly an art piece. And all the design elements and little details do come back to me and Colby on the farm, and very intentional in that way. So starting with the top, it's in the shape of a bolt. These are made out of recycled metal. They're not plastic or wood, but they're very heavy and feel, I guess, good in your hand. Is that how you would describe them?
Yeah.
But they are in the shape of a bolt because that's something that you would see here on the farm, and something that at the end of the day, Colby was always cleaning out of his pockets. And we thought, what would he take and just kind of put in the top and use as a topper? As you work your way down, you'll see that we've got this beautiful yellow color for our label. It really pops on the shelf. And that we drew inspiration from the corn that we grow right on the farm. So you can see just how closely those colors are and how they match. This is an actual corn cob that we just picked recently from this year's harvest. And it's absolutely beautiful and matches that yellow perfect. And then the shape of the label, it does wrap around the whole bottle. As I mentioned, we even have the mash bill right here on the back. But this really represents a belt buckle and a belt that was passed down from Colby's grandfather to his dad and then to Colby. And it's just a subtle nod to our heritage and our history. And we wouldn't be here without the forethought and really support from all of Colby's prior farming generations to help us. And then one of my favorite things is this fun little hidden Easter egg. And around the rim of the glass, it says, be good to the land and the land will be good to you, which is our Frey family motto, something that we live by here on the farm, which you guys can barely see that, but it is kind of a fun hidden message that people don't see right away, but it's so important to us to be able to take care of the land and really pass it down to our kids.
Yeah, as farmers, if we don't take really good care of our soil, our environment, our natural resources, then we don't have a future. And so my goal in life is to pass on the farm to my kids in as good or better condition than I received it in. And so to do that, we have to take really good care of all of our natural resources and really our ecosystem here. And so it's really important to us. And that's why we've made it the foundation of our bottle. And it's also the foundation of the farm.
Oh, was the bottle shape selected for any particular reason? We knew that we wanted a round bottle, and we really felt like this kind of mimicked a silo. But
which is where you store grain.
Where you
and
store
this
the
is
grain.
basically grain you're storing your grain in a bottle now.
Yeah.
We had a couple people point out that they're really impressed with your all sustainability efforts. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah,
sure. So, like I kind of started it on the tour, but a lot of our sustainability, we call it common sense sustainability. And it's because it's the right thing to do, but not the trendy thing to do. And I think a lot of the sustainable things that are around are just because it's a trendy term. And we didn't set off to do that. It's the same idea as be good to the land and the land will be good to you, because we want to take care of everything. And so, for example, like the cooling water on the stills, we're saving all that energy on the glycol chillers. We're growing the grain surrounding the distillery, so we're not hauling it in from other countries even. It's so much less. It's not a lot of energy to bring it here. Mm-hmm. We're taking the byproducts, which is the liquid, and the liquid that comes off the still goes onto our fields. I had a guy that wanted to put in he came to the distillery and he wanted to build a distillery in Truckee, California, and they said just to put the liquid from the mash cooker, the spent grain liquid down the storm drain, they'd have to put 20-part water to every 1 part of the liquid. And we go through like 4,000 gallons a day. Just to dump it down the drain, we'd have to put 80,000 gallons of water and waste it just dumping it down the drain. Whereas we're actually able to benefit from it by being here on the farm. Then the solids go to the dairy next door. They get fed to the cows. And so it's a great reuse of our byproducts, the solids. And then the dairy cows make manure. Manure is the best fertilizer there is, as every available nutrient that a plant might need. And so we spread that on our fields, so we don't have to haul in commercial fertilizer from around the world. Ironically, a lot of fertilizer comes from places like Russia, South Africa, South America, Canada, like all over the world. And so if you think about how much energy it takes to get those here, where we're just taking a byproduct from next door and using that for all of our fertilizer. Well, not all of them, but a very big majority of our fertilizer needs.
And that's why we call it common sense.
Common
because
sense,
it's something that we've always done.
Little things like our tractors have, one of my tractors has, it's called an IVT transmission, infinitely variable transmission. And what it does is it determines how much load you have on it, right? So if the tractor needs to work really hard, it revs the engine up and it puts the transmission down, just like a bicycle. When you're spinning fast, it's really easy to turn, revs up the engine, and you actually set the speed. And in a traditional tractor, you rev up the throttle all the way, and it's all the way up all day. It doesn't matter if you need it or not. But this senses, and it keeps you right at the right speed, so you're being the most fuel efficient with your transmission speed and your engine speed. Then they're all GPS guided, so that we're not overlapping a lot. We're not missing parts of our crop, and they're all just perfect. Because when you're steering, a lot of times you're overlapping, which is wasting fuel, labor, tires, all the natural resources that we're trying to conserve. Then we laser level all of our fields with this GPS system that gets them all within 1/100th of an inch, because we want the water to flow really evenly down the fields. So we constantly are leveling all of our fields to conserve water, which is really important.
Yeah,
also.
and I think that just kind of is our testament to like a modern take on farming and distilling, and really just being very respectful to our environment and the land.
Yeah, and that's really important to us. Mm-hmm. And so we take a lot of my family's traditions that have worked and also what have not worked, and then kind of couple those together with new ways to do things and new technology and everything else.
So I kind of teased some of our innovation earlier.
Okay.
So I told them we'd come back when you were here to talk about that last 5% of our production and what is in our innovation.
I tell everybody it's 5% of our production, but 95% of the fun, because it's our way to really like express ourselves through our grains. And our goal from the beginning was to showcase the grains. And so we have all kinds of fun mash bills. So we have our traditional bourbon, our traditional 100% rye, but we also have 100% corn, 100% wheat, 100% barley, 100% malted barley, Scotch style barley whiskeys. And we really did that so you could taste the grain by themselves. We didn't want, if you put in 10% something else, then you're always wondering like what's contributing what flavor. But this is 100% of each one of those grains. And I always thought too, it'd be fun someday, instead of doing like a barrel pick, it'd be really fun to do like a store blend or a tavern blend or something like that, where they could say, I give them 100% wheat, 100% rye, 100% barley, 100% corn, and a beaker and a syringe, and say, you tell me what you want your mash bill to be, and I'll blend it that way.
And I know we've got some folks from Northern Nevada. I've seen them in the chat box, but we've recently released our 100% oat last year, and we're getting ready to re-release it this year. And that's just one of those whiskeys that's in our innovation series. And it's amazing to see like that 100% oat is like really earthy. It's got like some woodsy characteristics, but it's sweet because I get a little bit of like mint chocolate chip on the nose. And you can only get those out at the distillery. So if you guys are ever in Northern Nevada, give us a call.
We might have some. Sometimes they sell out fast.
They do sell out really fast. Yeah.
But it's really fun for us because like the oat whiskey, right after we distilled it, it tasted like blueberries. And then like 6 months later, it started tasting like bacon. And you're like, how does it go from blueberries to bacon? And then 6 months after that, it started tasting like oatmeal cookies, like this sweet, And now after we bottle it, I feel like it tastes like an earthy, like in the wine world, it'd be like your earthy Pinot Noir type in the whiskey world. So it's really fun.
Yeah, it's definitely really popular in the tasting room.
Yep. But then we also have, where we're getting ready to release also 100% malted corn whiskey. And so that one's fun. We have a quad malt, we've been calling it quad malt because it's the same mash bill as our bourbon, but it's wheat, rye, barley, and corn, where all 4 grains are malted. And so it's really kind of fun for us because you can taste what the grains taste like malted compared to your unmalted traditional whiskey. So that's fun. We have a smoked oat and rye. We have, these are all in super small quantities.
Yeah, like some of them, we only have 2 barrels each year. And that's why we do only sell them in the tasting room, which is fun because it's something that you can't get anywhere else. And to be able to taste them back to back or right in line with like the bourbon, the rye, and then a quad malt or a smoked malt. And I just saw Michelle post road trip, not a far drive from Oregon. It's funny. Last weekend, we had people come from the Arizona-Mexico border, like Southern Arizona. It was a 20-hour trip all the way here just to come get one of our single barrels that we just released. Yeah. We've had lots of people from Oregon, San Francisco, Sacramento, LA, Las Vegas. We had somebody drive from San Diego. That's like a long drive. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So,
I was talking to Michael Moberly over the weekend, and he mentioned the Hazmat Barrel.
Yeah, that was that one. That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Right. Which he said was just delicious and crazy. He also wanted to know who you all think is the most handsome bartender in Reno.
Oh, Michael Moberly. Yeah, of course.
Silly Moberly.
Is it even a question?
Right. Come on. Will you ever bring back your absinthe? Lily wants to know.
No. So we've always thought of ourselves as a whiskey distillery, and that other stuff we made absinthe and some other spirits. And we always thought that kind of gave us something to do while the whiskey was aging. Because what we did not want to do is we did not want to buy sourced whiskey and put our name on it. And we didn't want to wait. Or we didn't want to release a 2 or a 3-year-old whiskey because you only have one chance to be a first impression and be new. And we didn't want that to be with a 2 or 3-year-old whiskey. And so we waited some of our whiskey in our first batch was over 5 years old. Yeah. And so that was really important to us. So we made things like the absinthe and vodkas and gins and other stuff that were really fun for us to do.
We really only release those in Northern Nevada. So if you are from Northern Nevada, you got very lucky and you got to taste some of it, but they're not going to come back into production.
Nigel was wondering if you've ever done a 100% oat whiskey.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
yeah. The oat is what we're getting ready to
Yeah.
release here pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, oats are really tough. They're super low yielding. And so I can see why a lot of people don't make oat whiskey because they're so hard. Oats are 60% hulls. So a hull is like the little protective shell that goes around the whiskey, around the grain. And so it's 60% hulls. I mean, it only has 40% of the actual grain inside of it. Mm-hmm. Then you take that grain and it doesn't have that much starch compared to the other grains. And starch is what eventually turns into alcohol. And so the yield on a batch of oat is like 2 barrels. When we do a batch of bourbon, it's like 11 barrels. And so, I mean, that's just the difference. We're using the same amount, same quantity of grain. And so oat's really interesting.
Yeah.
Everyone is asking where you can be found. So what markets are you in at the moment?
Yeah, so right now we're distributed in Nevada and California. Southern Glaciers is our distributor. We're able to keep both those markets really satisfied with an abundance of inventory. We did send a couple cases of bourbon up to Oregon. So if you are from Oregon, their state controlled liquor board did kind of sneak some of those cases in, which is exciting. We were happy to see that. And our next state we're going to launch in is Arizona with Breakthrough. But we really wanted to make sure we did a good job in each market that we launched in. And as Colby mentioned, we've never sourced any bourbon. So we're really only allowed to sell today what we distilled and aged over 5 years ago. So every year we have increased our production, and every year we have more whiskey going into barrels. So our ability to expand in the next couple of years is really exciting for us, and we're going to have a lot of product coming down the pipeline. But Nevada, California are only spots for distribution right now. And yes, you can order us online. We are at shop.freyranch.com. And you're going to want to join our email list. We call it the Dirt. We do launch all of our e-commerce releases to our e-news subscribers first. We did a drop of some rye single barrels, and they sold out within 3 hours. And that was 4 barrels and over 700 bottles. So they go by fast.
Wow. Everyone is excited to get their hands on it.
Yeah.
And then there was another question here. Raquel says they read about your high proof release. How often do you all do this, and do you announce it in advance? I'm guessing that maybe goes on the newsletter.
The e-news, yeah. So we did, that was our hazmat release. We actually only had about 120 bottles, but we probably had about 250 people in line, and it did sell out, right away. We did a 1 bottle limit per person, but join that e-newsletter, the Dirt. You can join via the pop-up on our website, freyranch.com. We always will announce our new releases to our subscribers first, whether it's a tasting room release or something that's on our e-commerce site.
For those of you that might not know, but the Hazmat Barrel is 140 proof or more. But the reason why that's so special is to be called bourbon. One of the requirements is you can only put it in the barrel at 125 proof or less. And so it actually has to gain proof in the barrel, which kind of all in our barrel warehouse and our climate, all the stars kind of have to align to make it do that. It's really kind of consistently stays the same here where we are. So that barrel was pretty special and why so many people came. But all of our single barrels are all barrel proof.
So I do want to pass it over to Billy Ray because he's got a great topic today he's going to be talking about Mother Nature and location choices and technique. But just a brief introduction for Billy Ray. He's our Southern California brand ambassador located in Los Angeles. And without further ado, I'm going to send it over.
All right. Thank you. What's up, PDX? Big shout out to all the squirrels out there. And let's get into this. So we're going to cover 4 aspects here that really kind of connect better inputs for better outputs. First being Mother Nature. Marco Pierre White's a chef. He is noted for a quote that said, "Mother Nature is the true artist. Our job is to allow her to shine." When I heard this quote as a bartender and beverage director, that really changed how I worked and how I approached things. It fundamentally changed my style. I became more interested in seasonality and a culinary approach, less intrinsics of classic cocktails. And knowing that I was working a program with Mother Nature, this took a lot of weight off my shoulders. Knowing that if I worked with Mother Nature instead of against Mother Nature, I was able to kind of shelf my ego and having an understanding that when I build a program, I'm never alone. And also by working with Mother Nature and amazing modifiers like Shro or Miracle Mile and quality distilleries like Frey Ranch, it gives me a creative space to just be a creative and have a great foundation already built in for me, which is really important. And then by using the time of year and season to dictate my menu and choices, really leaning into Mother Nature on these, and actually like leaning into farmers to help me with these processes. And I did that by going to local farmers markets, asking farmers what was in season, what was upcoming into season. And those kind of questions really helped me. And also having that understanding that Mother Nature giveth and Mother Nature taketh away. And what I mean by that, the best example is we were building a big dinner a couple months ago, and I really wanted to use tomatoes in this rye cocktail. And basically, we had 2 weeks of 110-degree weather, and all the tomatoes at Underwood Farms and Osteria Labuca were all bursted. So, scratch that idea of tomatoes. But because of the high heat and high sunlight exposure, peppers were in season and they were incredible, and we were able to shift and adjust. And so a negative became a super positive for us. These are just a few examples of how Mother Nature works and my life and building out better inputs for better outputs. The second key thing here is location. When I start a new program or take over an existing program, the first thing I look for is where is the location? Like, where is the bar located, first of all, right? And in the location of this bar or restaurant, is there 4 seasons, right? Is there 3 seasons? So whether I'm building a program for Kohler in Wisconsin or for B&G in Los Angeles, I really have to look at the seasonality of the whole year, right? And prep accordingly. So something like Wisconsin, where it'd be autumn right now, I would work on pickling mushrooms and dehydrating apples and all these things getting ready for winter. Where in Southern California, where I'm at currently, the world's my oyster. I also look at, are there any external factors, such as the climate, right? I live in Southern California. I know a lot of people here live in Northern California. Like, with fires upcoming, what does that look like? How does that affect local farmers and suppliers I'll be working with? I look at whether this is in an urban area, is it in the country, is it in the city, right? I think these things are very important to ask, because do we have access to suppliers? Do I have access to local farms? Is there a farmer's market? Is there a supply grocer that can deliver? And if so, can they deliver once a week, twice a week? What are those aspects? And then I need to look at the physical location of the space, right? Is there a prep room, right? Is there storage? If I do have a canneling and pickling line, like, where can I put those things? As well as cold storage and freezer storage. Am I sharing a walk-in with a chef? Do I have tall boys to work out of? Do I have a freezer section, whether it's an ice program, or I need to kind of like, back seal bags of syrups and put them away? So all those things I really look at as far as location. And also a big thing with location is always going to be staffing in the community. Like, is there enough staff and is there trainable staff to get to where we need to go? And then the last thing on location is, how can I give back to that community? And I think, as you can see here at PDX, we do a pretty good job of giving back to our community in this world. And then choices. It's a third thing that's really big for us, right? So if we let Mother Nature and the location influence and guide our choices when it comes to programming, we'll have better outputs. So if we talk about choices, right? Number one, as a team, what do we believe in? What are our core values, right? How do we work from there? What's the voice and how do we want to translate that on our program, on our menus, within our culture of our staff, right? Number two would be, how far do we want to go as a team and how far do we want to push it? Meaning, like, how elaborate can we get with the cocktails? Is it high volume? How do we bring that back, right? How do we get better pricing for better quality, right? What's the cost? How can we charge with that and still be sustainable, right? And then also the efficiency and speed of the program as well. And then we look at what brands do we trust and what brands do we want to work with, right? Who aligns with our beliefs, right? Our program's belief, and what gives you better inputs, gives you better outputs. So with Frey Ranch, you guys heard Colby and Ashley, go through the farm and these better inputs for better outputs. So I know if I'm working through an old fashioned, 80% of my drink is trusted and covered with those choices. And then how can those brands support our programs and teams? A big part of this is with education. Like, how do we work with these brands to really educate our staff, our team members, our kitchen, our servers, Can they help support, get us to farms, trips to farms, introductions with farmers? And what tools can they supply to help us? You know, and having that really, really true understanding that what choices we make today will affect the direction of our program and the future of our industry. I think that's a very important thing to look at, that it's not just menu to menu or drink to drink, that we can start to plan long-term, right? So if you guys heard Colby talk, you know, Colby's talking about crops and planting and irrigation and seasons, and that's just a 1-year cycle for that crop growth. And so we need to kind of look at, you know, building up beverage the same way. And then the last, and the thing that I love the most is technique. You know, as bartenders, we're not bound by limits or what box management or ownership tries to put us in. What binds us and holds us back is technique, right? We believe things are unattainable because of a lack of technique. But the truth is that once a bartender learns to practice technique and develops, any aspects of their job in the world will open up a little bit more. So if we look at, in a general way, these 3 elements, and we look at technique, and we look at our location, we look at our climate, we work with Mother Nature, right? And we have better choices. Once we roll technique into that, the world completely opens up. And what I mean by that is, if I look at July, right, for example, and I understand that I'm moving into autumn, then I'm coming into winter, right? If I have July right here, well, let's start canning strawberries. Let's start making a marmalade. Let's start pickling. Let's start infusing. Let's start fat washing, right? We have all these different techniques now, especially these culinary senses. And if anybody works in a restaurant that has access to a chef, like raise your hand, pull them aside, take a meeting, learn how to, you know, back seal, learn how to do these things that the kitchen's been doing for years, and really have that mixture of both. Because once we kind of attain those techniques, the world is our oyster. But yeah, so I think that's what I have. And I think I'm just on time. So with that, I will pass it past to Ashley and Colby. Or if anybody has any questions, please let me know.
Billy, I would love if you talked a little bit about the dinner that you did at Mozza and the cocktails that you paired, specifically the one with the pasta dish and using some of that pasta water in the cocktail, and how amazing those tied together. Because I just thought that was like incredible.
Yeah, one of the things I kind of look at is, how do I cross-utilize as much as possible, right? Colby talked about sustainability and what we have access to. And sometimes when we work on a menu and we're working in a situation like at Osteria Mozza with an incredible chef, Nancy Silverton and Chef Kirby, right? Instead of me trying to bring all these outside influences in, I want to kind of cross-utilize what they have, right? And one of the things they have is they just have this amazing starch water from cooking pasta constantly. So making like a corn milk, right, and rolling in some like pasta starch water into a syrup really added great mouthfeel and texture. It cost nothing. And it really was kind of having that understanding of, you know, I'm working with a chef that truly believes that better inputs give you better outputs, right? That has a porter tasting, expecting, you know, tomatoes and inspecting corn when it comes in, right? So I want to work with that. So if I trust that they have their technique and their systems down, then it's easy for me to come in as a bartender and say, look, great, I have Frey Ranch whiskey and it's delicious. I'm going to fat wash that with a beautiful olive oil out of Ojai, which is about 10 miles from where I live, right? Then I'm going to make a syrup based off pasta water and starch and a modification off of fresh corn milk that's in season. And really, like, all I did was apply 3 different techniques, right? Made sure my measurements were right, and then I just got out of the way. You know, and I
well,
think
you
that's
make
the
it
thing.
sound simple, but it was absolutely delicious. And
yeah, I think
so.
Yeah, I think that's just the big thing here, right? When we, you know, hearing Colby talking, hearing what you guys do back at the ranch is really inspiring for bartenders, because it gives us an understanding that you're doing everything from like ground to glass. That, you know, when I first went to the farm, I worked for big brands and had a huge background in whiskey, but I didn't know anything about agriculture, because as bartenders, we always start the conversation as, what's the mash bill? Let alone where is it distilled or bottled, right? We kind of go, what's the mash bill? And we move on from there. And this is really interesting, because now when I ask questions about whiskey, I go, where do you get your grains from? What time of season do you plant in? What's the water source, right? Is it sprinkled? Do you guys flood irrigate? That was never in my verbiage prior to working with you guys at Frey Ranch, you know, and that's going to constantly change the game in Los Angeles, because if I go back to being a buyer, my first question is going to be, tell me about the grains in your whiskey.
Yeah.
because
That's a great point.
Yeah. And as bartenders, we're that middle ground, right? We're making sure the customer gets great quality. We're making sure the rep's not, we're like this holder of quality in the middle here. A rep's trying to sell us all this stuff. And then we're trying to filter that through the customer. So if we know that a brand like Frey Ranch has better inputs, gives you better outputs, it really takes away my decision making on what I'm going to bring in.
Yeah.
Thank you, Billy.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Liz, are there any more great questions that came through?
Yeah, just quickly, Gregory White said that he's just very impressed with your whole Metro Shelf situation. So
I mean, there's nothing better than a Metro rack,
Right. Awesome. I think we missed a couple while you were taking us through the distillery, Colby. Everyone is really impressed with the custom still situation. So they're really curious about repair work, custom parts, what level of difficulty does that deal with?
No, that's a great question. And well, like I said in the tour, we're so lucky that we put it all together ourselves, because it really allows us to really understand it and fix it and understand why it might not be working and how to get the most out of it. And so we're as farmers, we have to be our own electricians and plumbers and welders and everything else. And so I'm really proud that we've been running 363 days a year for the last 4 years. And before that, it was kind of seasonal, half the year. Since 2014, we've never had one day of unplanned shutdown because of a broken anything or anything like that, because everything's pretty redundant the way we designed it. We try to have 2 of everything. You guys saw 2 continuous stills. We have 2 steam generators. We installed it all ourselves. So if something goes wrong, we just get in there. We try to figure it out. We try to get it fixed. And we kind of know the weak points of everything. And so we try to keep a really healthy spare parts inventory on hand.
Yeah, and I think just staying up with the maintenance too, which is really important.
It's the same as a tractor. If you don't maintain them, if you don't take care of them, you don't grease them or do preventative maintenance, you're going to have problems. And so we really focus on that in the distillery. And by designing it ourselves, it just means it's a lot. It's fun for me to go and fix it and keep it going and everything,
Absolutely. Another question here was about the crops. Do you all grow and rotate over those?
Yeah, I think I saw that one. It had something to do with cover crops. And so, yes, we rotate our crops. That's really important. Crop rotation is really important, because if you grow the same crop on the same field, you get a buildup of pests in that field. So, for example, if worms, you might have a few worms the first year. If you plant the same crop next year, then you're going to have more worms, and the same crop the next year, you're going to have more, and they multiply, and then they're a problem. And so it's really important to rotate your crops for soil health, for pests and things like that. And so we always rotate alfalfa in between our grain crops. Alfalfa is a legume. It's really good for the soil. Has these deep tap roots that go down deep in the soil too. If you guys ever noticed, a potted plant always has a hole in the bottom of it, because you need drainage. You need that water to be able to drain out. You don't want to grow a plant in an actual bowl with no holes in it. It's the same thing with soil. And so those deep roots that grow with the alfalfa, actually, when you take the alfalfa out, break down, they decompose, and they allow that water to percolate and get that drainage in the soil too. And so it's this nice little circle. But then what's neat about alfalfa too, though, is you can't plant it year after year after year either. So you need to plant something else. And so we have this nice little rotational with wheat, rye, barley, and corn and alfalfa, to where we're really trying to do what's best for the farm. We take soil tests, we take tissue tests on all of our plants, we send them in, and we really try to plant the crop that would do the best for that soil and really improve our farm in general.
Awesome. The only other thing that I think we didn't talk about that I know someone wanted me to ask about was the honey that you all do on site.
So we have a lot of bees that come to the ranch. They're not our bees, but they bring them here from California, because they pollinate all the tree crops in California, and they need somewhere for them to go to basically just keep them alive. And so they bring them here to the ranch. They make alfalfa honey, and alfalfa honey is it's really interesting. It's dark. It looks like this bourbon. It's not, your beautiful yellow honey. It's dark brown, and it's really flavorful. It's got a lot of minerals and everything in it. And in return for letting them bring the bees here, they give us all the honey that comes from the bees. And so we package that up and give it away to friends, family, customers, bartenders, and it's really fun for us to share that.
Great
with people.
honey syrup.
Yeah. Makes them, great gold rush, or what we call the ranch hand. Sorry, my voice is going out.
Awesome. Well, again, when I was talking to Michael this weekend, he said, make sure to ask them about the honey. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we're right at time. Do you all have any final thoughts or anything?
No, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. It really means a lot. As a farmer, I'm on the farm a lot. And so it really means a lot that we get to share things with everybody and you guys and get to share our story.
Yes. And we're super excited. We're going to be up at Portland Cocktail Week in November. I think at the trade show is what you guys call it. And
I think I got a surprise for everybody.
Yeah, come see us.
Oh, surprises. Awesome. Michelle said that she made a hot toddy with your honey and your whiskey.
Those are the best. When you have a cold, I make hot toddies and they like fix me right up.
Yeah.
Looking forward to one. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. This was so great. Looking forward to seeing you in Portland. Like I said, if you haven't already gotten your bartender passes, those are at pdxcw.com. You can go there and grab them. Visit with Colby and Ashley while you're out there. And also don't forget to like and follow us at Portland Cocktail Week on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, all of it. If you follow us on Instagram, that's where we update you the most on what we've got coming up. So thank you all again so much, and we'll see you in Portland.
Yeah.
Thanks,
thank you
everyone.
all.
Bye
Bye,
now.
everybody.
Bye.